Welcome back to LifeTalk. I'm Mark Crutcher, and I'm joined as usual by the usual suspects. My trusty sidekick here at Life Dynamics, Renee Hobbs. Hello, Rennie.
Hello.
And Melissa Conway from
Good to
Texas
be here
Right to
again.
Life.
Yes.
And her trusty sidekick. Who's the sidekick?
I'm older, so she's got to be.
Oh,
my
you got to be the sidekick. Okay. Elizabeth McClung. How are you, Elizabeth?
Very well. Happy to be here.
Thank you for coming back again. We didn't know if we scared you off the last two shows or not.
No, sir.
No, you're pretty tough. Wait, like I say, you're the youngest of five.
Yes.
You had to fight to,
You do.
to survive.
With brothers, you do.
Right. The pro-aborts, of course, are always talking about how pro-woman they are. One of our arguments has been women deserve better than abortion, right? Now you have one of these pro-aborts coming out here and literally saying, no, women don't deserve better than abortion. This woman's named Erin Matson, saying that you cannot be a feminist and pro-life. I guess she'd tell that to Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Virginia Woodhull,
Susan B. Anthony.
Susan B. Anthony. She'd tell all of them because they were all pro-life. Evelyn Judge, who wrote the original Equal Rights Amendment,
Way before her.
way before this girl was ever dreamed of. So I guess she'd tell them that they couldn't be true feminists. They made a coin, right, for Susan B. Anthony because of her feminist background. But she's not a feminist because she was pro-life. So anyway, she set this new standard. But let me read you what she said. Quote, so one example of a myth, talking about pro-life myths, is, as feminists for life have stated, women deserve better than abortion, unquote. The fact is that women don't deserve better than abortion. Abortion is a safe medical procedure. Access to abortion affirms autonomy for each woman in this country. Access to abortion puts women in control of their reproductive lives. This idea that women regret their abortions is a total myth and a lie. Have you ever talked, Renee, just in the 5 years you've been here, have you ever talked to a woman who regretted her abortion?
Every single one of them has regretted their abortion.
Everyone that you've talked to.
Everyone that I've talked to.
And some of them to the point of near suicide.
That's right.
And some of them, you dealt with that lady not long ago that was in her 60s,
Yes.
had her abortion when she was 19,
Right.
and still crying about it,
That's right.
and had no relationship with her two 40-year-old sons
Yep.
because of this abortion.
Right.
I would challenge this woman to sit down with this woman and say, you don't regret your abortion. What are you, lying? Are you just making this stuff up for the pro-lifers? It's unbelievable, but this is the mentality that these people have. Another thing I want to ask about, we've asked this question, what happened to choice? These people have always said this is not about abortion, this is about choice. And yet they want federal funding for abortion, right? So in other words, you and I don't have a choice as to whether we want to pay for it or not. Women only have a choice whether they want to have one, but you and I don't lose our choice to whether we want to pay for it or not. We have to pay for it. And this goes on. And now we're seeing all these situations we talked about in a couple of previous shows in California where they're forcing CPCs to give referrals for abortion. They're forcing churches to buy insurance that covers abortion. And now they're looking at forcing CPCs not to advertise to get women to come in. And now you have in Illinois, the governor has signed a bill forcing these same sort of things on medical providers in Illinois. They have to refer, no matter what their position on abortion is, they must refer for abortion. They must. It amends the state's Health Care Right of Conscience Act. So in other words, it doesn't amend it, it eliminates it. It says pro-life doctors and clinics have to refer patients to health care providers who will perform abortions. Now on a federal level, we have a law that protects conscience. And this law that now he signed into existence directly contradicts the federal law, and the Obama administration is not going after them, on this. And I want to point something else out about this. This governor of Illinois who signed this bill is a Republican. And, you know, you've heard me say it a million times. We've been stabbed in the back by Republicans as often as we've been stabbed in the chest by Democrats. And this is a good example of it. This Republican governor signed this bill. In the legislature, it barely passed. And it was on a straight party line vote, basically. All the Republicans opposed it, all the Democrats favored it. He voted with the Democrats.
Just because there's an R after your name doesn't mean you're truly pro-life. I mean, you can stick feathers on your head, but it doesn't make you a chicken.
Right, that's right. That's exactly right. That sounds like something a girl from Texas would say. Where were you born?
Houston.
Houston, right. That's good. Utter hypocrisy again. We talked about this last month, but it's still going on. We've got this problem with the Zika virus going on around the country. And women, this is a devastating thing.
Right.
And it may spread beyond just Florida and now a couple of cases in Texas and maybe Louisiana. This has the potential to be a pandemic. Congress has appropriated money to fight this disease. Congress has already passed the legislation. The money's already there. It's already funded. Harry Reid in the Senate is holding it up. Why is he holding it up, Renee?
He wants abortion. He does not want people to find a cure for the Zika virus.
The reason he's holding it up, it doesn't have any money for Planned Parenthood.
That's right.
His love of abortion is so blinded him. He doesn't care what happens to these people that get Zika virus. He doesn't care about these babies who have birth defects from this. They don't care.
Right.
If this bill does not provide money to Planned Parenthood, he's holding it up in the Senate, keeping it from going to a vote. What do you say to people like this? You know, I've said before, the people on the other side of this issue fall into three categories. Either they're really stupid, they truly don't know, they're uninformed, they don't know that abortion is murder, or they're insane. I think a lot of them are mentally unhinged. When you the people who come out here like this new vice presidential candidate under Clinton saying, "I believe abortion's murder," he said that, but I think it ought to be legal. That person has got mental problems. That person is unhinged mentally, not to mention that he's a coward. But the third category is people who are simply evil, and we have to recognize that evil exists in this world. Harry Reid, to hold this bill up because it won't give money to Planned Parenthood, the man is evil.
Well, he's holding the whole entire country hostage.
Right.
And the reality is that if we were allowed through the media to share the truth, there are literally thousands and thousands of clean clinics, of places that women could go to receive treatment. But he's saying no because I want to fund the killing of unborn children.
Right.
And Planned Parenthood is one of the biggest vehicles that can accomplish
No
that.
matter what those unborn children look like or whatever diagnosis they may have while they're still in utero, he still wants to fund their killing.
Yep. If it doesn't fund Planned Parenthood, he's not going to let this money be released.
Follow the money.
Speaking of money, the king of abortion, Warren Buffett, I've talked about him in my new book, Siege, quite a bit, because these multi-billionaires out there, like Warren Buffett and a bunch of the others, they put together this cabal that is funding eugenics around the world, and right here in the United States as well, and Warren Buffett's the worst. So far, Warren Buffett has spent, are you ready for this? $1.85 billion, with a B, of his own dollars into the eugenics, abortion, birth control agenda. Almost $500 million of his dollars went directly to Planned Parenthood. $500 million. This man is a hardcore eugenicist, and he's a racist, like eugenics is founded on race. But here's what I wondered about. Why, when Warren Buffett made an endorsement speech for Hillary Clinton at the Democratic Convention, why didn't they say anything about the $1.8 billion that Buffett has given into the abortion industry? They act like he's just this philanthropic businessman who wants to set the world straight, and he happens to support Hillary Clinton. That has nothing to do with it. This man is a hardcore eugenicist. You're not going to tell me that if somebody had given $1.8 billion to Donald Trump, and it was for something that he was supporting that the media didn't like, that they wouldn't have brought that up.
Oh, sure.
That would have been front page news. That would have been the lead story on all these newscasts. But they never mentioned Warren Buffett's $1.85 billion.
They want to sweep this one under the rug and for people not to know the truth.
And you say something like 1.5 billion, people kind of lose their eyes glass over. They lose focus of what that is. That's 1,500 million. Think about that. $1,500 million.
I'm still floored by the fact that the largest killer of babies not only receives all of his money, but still has outlets and streams of taxpayer funding. How much more money do they need in their coffers to kill off future generations?
Apparently a lot. And I talk about the money end of it in my new book, Siege. I spend quite a bit of time talking about that because I don't think the pro-life movement fully realizes the role that money plays in this.
Yeah, it's all about the money.
It's all about money. We talked earlier about this woman saying women don't deserve better than abortion, right? Abortions are safe, and they just dismiss it. I got a really nice letter just a couple of days ago. Actually, you got it from Deborah Cardamone, whose daughter was killed by an abortionist. This is about the anniversary of that. She wrote us a real nice letter because we created the website Safe and Legal because she had contacted me and saying, nobody's paying attention to my daughter.
Right.
And she knew that we had the autopsy pictures. People think somebody dies, oh, that's sad, but, it's nice and clean. Look at the autopsy pictures. I don't know, have y'all been on the website and seen
Yeah,
it?
it's horrific.
It's jarring.
Yeah. Her mother sent me this letter the other day thanking us for doing that and talking about how nobody else is paying attention to this. And the pro-aborts, we have documented over the years, go out of their way to bury this. I wrote in line 5 the mechanisms that they use. I'll just give you one example. They have controlled the Centers for Disease Control's abortion surveillance branch ever since it was created, and that was before Roe versus Wade. Most of the people that have run it have actually been practicing abortionists, and even the ones who weren't were members of the National Abortion Federation or National Abortion Rights Action League, or sometimes both. It's always been controlled by radical pro-aborts. And just to give you one example, David Grimes, who's one of these people, and he was a practicing abortionist. Not only was he a practicing abortionist, he was doing abortions while he was the head of the abortion surveillance branch at the CDC. He was moonlighting as an abortionist at Atlanta Surgery Center, which was an abortion clinic. Clearly a conflict of interest. You wouldn't put up with this anywhere else, but abortion gets away with it. One of the things that he did while he was there is he changed some of the reporting mechanisms. And one example, we had identified with our little meager resources here, 16 women that had died in a given year. We had gotten their their death certificates or their autopsies or death records or whatever. We had confirmed 16 deaths during this one particular time period. During that same time period, the CDC only said there was one. So we started looking at these things. One of them that we found, and I could go back and find them all and tell you what excuse they used not to count them. But just to give you one example, this woman was killed down in Florida by an abortionist, and it was clear. I mean, there's no doubt about what caused in the autopsy. They even said she died from sanguination, which means she bled out from a perforated uterus, which also nicked her uterine artery, and she bled out from it. They didn't count that one. So we started looking to see how it was they didn't count it. What they found out was that the guy who did this abortion, the abortionist in this case, had allowed his medical license to lapse, which is not uncommon. You just don't think about it. It's like your driver's license lapses, and a couple of days later you send in the thing and you're licensed again. Same thing. This is not uncommon
This is his
for doctors to do.
profession, though.
Right. He had allowed his medical license to lapse. Wow. And he had then subsequently sent it in, and they said, okay, you're fine, keep on going. He killed her during that gap. So they counted that as an illegal abortion because he wasn't licensed at the time. And this is the way they will move these things off. And we found lots of different examples of how they would do this to keep from counting these women as deaths due to abortion. And we're seeing this all over the country. We've seen it for years. And one of the most outrageous ones, recently in Mother Jones magazine, Nina Martin wrote an article in there talking about how there's no evidence that abortion is dangerous and nobody dies and it's perfectly safe. And she cites in there a 2008 study by a woman named Deanna Green Foster from the University of California in San Francisco. Now, they don't mention that there is no more radically pro-abortion college campus than the University of California at San Francisco. This is where Warren Buffett pours at least $1 million a year into to train abortionists. Anyway, the study that she cites has been disproven by several people that have looked at it, medical professionals. But listen to this, quote, having an abortion did not lead to depression, PTSD, or other mental health problems, and not having an abortion meant that women were likely to remain, quote, tethered to abusive partners. So if you don't allow this woman to have an abortion, she's going to be tethered to some abusive partner. Now, you and I did that study, wrote that report, under the radar violence. It's abortion that causes this. This is another one of these examples where they're trying to blame us for their failures. Look at the number of women, and this is totally being swept under the rug, women that are put in nursing homes, put in permanent vegetative states, and killed. In our report, we only dealt with women who were murdered
Yes.
for refusing to have abortions.
Yes.
And just in our little meager resources, we had, it's almost 100 in that report, as I remember, 80, 90, or 100, something like that.
Yeah.
Yet, if an abortionist were killed today, it'd be front page news. Why do these dead abortionists count, but these dead women don't? That's the question I have. But for her to sit there and say that by not allowing women to have abortions, you tether them to an abusive relationship, when it's the abusive relationships that are causing women to have abortions to begin with very often. Most of these women feel coerced, feel threatened, and in these cases, when these women don't cave into it, they wind up dead or they wind up in a nursing home. It's utterly preposterous.
It's
And
another
outrageous.
example of fear-mongering, of just trying to push us into believing that, it's our fault as a society to try to protect women.
It's a classic example of people who are pathological liars.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the bottom line. When you get right down to it, that's what it is. We just had a situation up in Michigan that might actually fall into one of these categories, where this girl or woman may have been killed by abortion. We may never find out what happened, although we have people on the ground that are helping out with that. And one of them is Cheryl Sullenger from Operation Rescue in Wichita, Kansas, and she joins us by phone. Hello, Cheryl.
Hello.
How are
Great
you?
to be here.
Quickly, Cheryl, tell us what the situation is with this case up in up in Michigan.
Well, right now we have obtained some documentation that shows that this woman's death was actually related to abortion. She had an abortion on June 30th, and on July 2nd, she was in so much abdominal pain after her abortion that she went to the hospital emergency room in her hometown of Battle Creek. There, she discussed her abortion with emergency room physicians who apparently didn't want to deal with her much. They gave her pain meds and told her to see her personal physician the next day. Well, this poor girl went to her mom's house because she was afraid to be alone. She was in so much pain, she was worried that if she had no one to take care of her, she was worried what would happen to her. So she went to her mom's house, went to bed, barely able to crawl into bed. She lays there, in a state of agony for hours and hours. And her mom checked on her occasionally throughout the next day, but she never really woke up, and she died in her mother's bed. And her mother found her when she was getting ready to go to bed herself in the early morning hours of July 4th. So it's clear to us that the abortion had something to do with this woman's death. She was perfectly healthy before. She was a mother of a 1-year-old son. She was living independently. And so it's clear to us that she had never gone to the abortion clinic. She would still be alive
Now,
today.
we know this young lady's name,
We do. Her name is Cree Erwin.
Cree Erwin.
She was 24 years old. She had a sister and a brother, a mother, family that loved her very much, and they were devastated by her death. We were able to find out just over the weekend and confirm that she did have her abortion at a Planned Parenthood facility in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We are in the process of filing complaints against that abortion clinic right now. We're still actually looking to find out exactly who did her abortions, but one of the abortionists that worked there is a woman named Mandy Gittler, and
about her.
that name may be familiar to you because she was also involved in the death of another abortion patient in Chicago a couple of years ago. Her name was Tonya Reaves.
Well,
And,
let me make
sorry.
sure people understand something about that Tonya Reaves situation. Tonya Reaves did not die from medical malpractice or from an accident. Tonya Reaves was murdered. I don't care what anybody says. If you read the Illinois statute on what's called depraved indifference murder, She fits that pattern. They injured her, but they didn't want to call an ambulance because there were pro-lifers out on the sidewalks, and they didn't want an ambulance coming up there again. They let her sit they literally walked around her out in the hall. They rolled her out into the hall, and she bled out for 5.5 hours before they called an ambulance, and it was too late. She died. I think you're being a little bit too nice here, Cheryl. This was not a malpractice situation. It was not an accident. They murdered this girl, and nobody did a thing about it.
You know what? I'm really with you on that, and I am concerned that it's happened again. And we don't know for sure she was involved in Cree Erwin's abortion, but if she is, trust me, there will be hell to pay, because the fact that this woman has been involved in 2 incidents, if that's the case, then that's going to be absolutely ridiculous that she's allowed to keep a medical license. And Planned Parenthood should be held accountable for that, because what they did was they took Mandy Gittler out of that Chicago abortion clinic and they moved her up to Michigan to the Kalamazoo clinic. They knew full well that she was actually a danger to the public, and they put her in this Michigan abortion clinic in order to get her away from the situation where she had that publicity over the death of Tonya Reaves. So there's a lot of implications to this death. And, another thing I wanted to bring up was the fact that, because Cree Erwin died at her mother's home, there was no ambulance that came to the abortion clinic. So we would have never known about this if it hadn't been for an astute reporter up there in Michigan who got word of this story and looked into it and reported on it. And that story popped up in my Google alerts and my email, and that's how we found out about this. And if it hadn't been for that news story, thank God for an honest reporter, we would have never known about this. It would have been swept under the rug, and you can bet that no one at that Planned Parenthood clinic was going to call up the CDC and say, oh, we want to report the fact that we just killed another woman.
Right.
They're not going to do that.
And here's the deal. Here's the thing that you need to understand about this, is that, we had a situation where you say there was an honest reporter, and that almost sounds like an oxymoron, but nonetheless, you have an honest reporter there. But how many times does this happen in a given month where there is no honest reporter and they just bury these women?
It's not any different than Leroy Carhart. He has killed multiple women and still has his license.
And pro-abortion don't seem to have a problem with it.
Yeah.
Well, I think, doesn't it have a big problem to do with the reporting too? I mean, a termination of pregnancy, whether it be through natural childbirth or an elective abortion, and then up to 43 days after a woman has that baby or terminates that life, that's considered a pregnancy complication. Right. And so it doesn't go down in the books as counting as an abortion complication. It goes down in the books as a pregnancy complication.
Oh, yeah. Well, we covered that in line 5 about how they reclassify them as a complication due to pregnancy as opposed to an elective abortion.
Well, and I'm sorry, we get multiple phone calls of girls that go to the hospital because they're cramping or they're bleeding or whatever, and they send them home. The ER doctor sends them on home. And when we get these calls, I tell the girls, I don't care what the situation is, go to another hospital immediately. They need to do a DNC. They need to
figure out what's going on.
Right.
Right. You can bleed to death, or you can get a septic infection. If that material becomes necrotic, you get a septic infection, you can die in hours.
Right.
Well, anyway, Cheryl, I assume you guys are going to keep following this deal.
Absolutely. We're still waiting for the autopsy report to come out. We're hoping there'll be a little bit more information that we can glean from that. And we're in contact with some people close to the family that are ministering to the family. And so we're actually hoping for a lawsuit out of this eventually, so that if nothing else happens to Planned Parenthood, they get hurt in the wallet for doing this to this poor woman.
If there was any justice left in America, they'd be under criminal charges for having this woman who murdered Tonya Reaves and up there. And you know what? It's not a whole lot different if you think about it for a minute, Cheryl. The Catholic Church came under enormous criticism because of the situations where they had a priest that was abusing a child or children, and they would just move him to another diocese to hide it when he got caught. Mm-hmm. And that went around, and they'd go from diocese to diocese. We had that situation right here in Dallas where that happened. And eventually the little boy that this Rudy Koss was assaulting, committed suicide and left a suicide note talking about it. And that's the way it came out. But if if this little boy had never killed himself, never left a suicide note, they would have just transferred him to another diocese when he got caught, or another parish, and that would have been the end of it. That's exactly what's happening right here. There is no difference. The only difference is that instead of people being molested, they're being killed. Mm-hmm. That's the only difference.
Right, I agree. I should mention that there actually is an open police investigation into the death of Cree Erwin. And it's a long shot because these things are rarely charged criminally, but there actually could be criminal charges. That investigation is still open, and we are actually hoping for that, although, like I said, it's a little bit of a long shot.
Cheryl, are you making sure the police know about the situation in Chicago?
We actually have not contacted the police about that, but that's a good idea, and I think I'll put it on my to-do list.
That needs to be done right now. That police officer needs to know this is not an isolated event, that this woman is in Michigan because she was involved in this situation in Chicago. And very often with police departments in criminal situations, the fact that there was a previous event radically changes the way they approach it.
Right. I totally agree. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cheryl, for what you're doing, and keep us posted on what's going on. We might have you back on next week's show if something happens between now and then.
All right, I sure will. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Say hi to Troy.
All right, I will.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
The beat goes on.
It sure does.
It's the same thing we've been dealing with for the 36 or whatever years that I've been at this. It's the same thing we're always dealing with. But anyway, again, great show, guys. You're
Thanks for having
doing your
us.
job. Thank you for your participation, and we'll see you next week.
All right.
That's all the time we have. Until next time, remember, Life Dynamics is not here to put up a good fight. We're here to win, because winning is how the killing stops. We'll see you next week.